Thanks so much, everyone, for watching. We've got an epic lineup tonight of speakers. We've got an awesome panel here. Amazing group of functional doctors, technology, activists for a leap forward in medicine.
You know, our goal is to make it easy for practitioners to learn in community.
This ecosystem that is being set up by the meetup groups, we believe will be the future ecosystem of this evolved primary care network, and it all revolves around you.
Welcome to the Functional Forum. Thanks for joining us in the charge to accelerate the evolution of medicine. Please welcome your host, James Maskell.
Hello and welcome to the Functional Forum. We are back in downtown Chicago for this year's PLMI conference on the cross-section of metabolic health, endocrine health, and detoxification. It's an incredible conference, lots of great speakers, great attendees. We'll have some of the best bits for you over the next hour. Enjoy. One of my favorite speakers of all time, Dr. Deanna Minich, spoke at this event, and she introduced a new concept, a new word into the lexicon, and I think you're going to like it. Enjoy, Dr. Deanna Minich.
All right, so phytoneuroendocrine system. This is a term that I recently just coined after I went to Dr. Bland's PLMI last year. And what I want to talk about in this section is take the polyphenols a little bit further, and then talk about two other categories of plants as it relates to modulating the endocrine system. Because I do think that we need plants, smarty plants, right? Plants are very smart. They are stationary. They need to survive. And so I think that the more that we can align to different phytochemicals, that we can very astutely and smartly prime our inner physiology. So on that note, you know, much of obesity and obesogens, if we look at that whole milieu and that whole, I would say an epidemic that has been forming, is that many times we see that there's a clock derangement. So a circadian rhythm issue. And we see that in shift workers, right? You see that outright. So what we're learning is that polyphenols may be that essential dietary component to keep the circadian system fit, to really stay in alignment with those circadian clock genes. So this is why eating seasonally would help our bodies to get the signal at the right time of year to sync us up better. What I think is also interesting is that polyphenols are very bitter. They're bitter and astringent. And we know a lot about the benefits of bitter. Bitter tends to be better. And so with polyphenols, they seem to have that ability, that have that capacity. And what we see is that taste, the chemosensory aspect of taste, also seems to have a rhythmic fluctuation with daily cycles, circadian rhythm, even menstrual cycles and seasonal cycles. So why is it that the traditional medicine systems talk about all the many flavors of food? And I think that what happens with people over time is they get into these food ruts. They're used to certain flavors. They're used to certain taste signatures. So how do we help them to expand beyond that? Because indeed, bitter is going to be better for a number of these different metabolic parameters, because that is the signaler of the polyphenols. You know, it really makes me think about my colleague, Dr. Michael Stone. So I was part of a clinical trial with him, and we tasted bitter. We used bitter tasting strips for people in the clinical trial. And it was so interesting to see who was a super bitter taster and who was not. And you can do that very easily with PTC strips. You have people put it on their tongue and they'll tell you right away if they taste it. That can help you to gauge their polyphenol intake and what might be happening. You can actually change that dynamic a bit I'm sure that some of you have seen that clinically, even with the elimination diet. If you do that for about 7 days, the taste buds start to change, right? So I just want to give you a couple of other, I would say, hacks as it relates to polyphenols. One of the things that helps even more to potentiate these polyphenols is to cut plant foods up, cut them up in the kitchen. So not to just bite into an apple, just bite by bite, but if you can actually slice it and cut it, you're going to increase the number of phenolics. In fact, the more that you cut something, this is seen by the plant in some way, if we personify the plant, as some kind of stress that it needs to react to. So if you look at some of these, this is fascinating. So you can see the cutting style that's listed for the individual fruit and vegetable and the increase in the phenolic content. So just by shredding carrots, you increase it by 5.2 times versus slicing 1.67. Shredding carrots potentiates phenolic acids. So that's another tip that you can be giving patients. If we look at the liver responds really well to bitters. We know that from traditional medicine as well, can stimulate a number of the secretions in the gut. And as I was mentioning before, I think we can modify that somewhat. There are certain gene variants, certain genes that are connected to bitter taste. But what we're seeing is that there's a connection with obesity. There's a connection with body mass index.
Hi, my name is Dr. Lauren Castle. I'm the founder of the Functional Medicine Pharmacist Alliance, and I'm here at PLMI and so excited for the opening talks from Dr. Jeffrey Bland, where he told us all that we are essentially all living in hologram. And that concept is something that I find really fascinating because it speaks to the bigger picture and the interconnectedness of health, life, and the world that we live in. And so I think it's been really beautiful to hear all of the speakers talking about things from genetics to our spiritual health and emotional health and mental health and how all of it is interconnected. So as a pharmacist, this is something that I plan to bring back into my patients and my community and continue to share this information and ways that we can all live together in this holographic universe.
Here at PLMI and our major sponsor, the Lifestyle Matrix Resource Center, have a booth. And so let's just show you. Actually, since the last time that we connected, LMRC has an awesome new website. And so if you go to the website, you can check out all the tools they have, all the resources, get in there and get busy with that. But let's go over and see. So this conference has been about cardiometabolic health, and you can see some of the assets that are created. There's a cardiometabolic vitals in practice guide, and that has a lot of clinical information, very easy to, this is for the practitioner. But then over here, you also have these tools that can be used by practitioners. So if someone comes in with high blood pressure, here's a little bit of information about the hypertensive risk factors, blood pressure classifications, and then on the back, nutrient recommendations and lifestyle recommendations. So these are things that you can use in practice to make it really easy for you to deliver patient education and to make it easy for your patients to participate. This is the kind of stuff why we partner with LMRC, because this is necessary to delivering empowered education, and I hope you take advantage. Check out the link below, check out the new website. Thanks so much to LMRC for their ongoing support. So one of my favorite doctors over the years, Dr. Jade Teta, very interesting practitioner and talking about the fundamentals of behavior change. We caught up with him for a quick chat. Enjoy. All right, we are here at PLMI with Dr. Jade Teta, one of my favorites.
James, what's going on? Good to see you.
So you've been listening along to some of the other sessions. What have you learned, or what intrigued you from this morning?
Well, Dr. Deanna Minich, who is one of my favorites, she said something this morning that I just thought was so profound. And what she said is, we think about toxins from food. We think about toxins from our environment. We don't think about toxins from our spiritual, emotional space, the way we think, our perception, and how that drives how we interact in the world. And from my perspective, what you see when you're working in the clinic is that has everything to do with if people even do what you're asking them to do. What's their thought process? What is their practical circumstances in their life? How are they stressing and managing that stress? And how is it impacting their psychology and their physiology and their spirituality?
Yeah. One of the reasons why I love talking to you is because I think you recognize that the biggest battle is 0 to 1 in participation, right? And a lot of times it's those kind of things that stop people from fully engaging, or even not fully engaging at all.
Yeah.
So what's the antidote?
Yeah, so from my perspective, purpose is the antidote to the mental, emotional toxicity that we have. And what is purpose? It's just the humble recognition that I am a unique individual that has something to offer in a way that I only can. So from my perspective, what we need to do is help people tap in to that purpose. Why are they here in the first place? Why are they making these changes? What's it tied to? Is it tied to family? Is it tied to their work? What do they want to accomplish in their lives? And if they don't have that and they feel lost in their lives, then these changes, no matter how good the mechanism is in terms of the medicine we deliver, they're not going to be able to do that because they don't have a reason to do it.
Yeah. So do you get into this on the first appointment?
Pretty much from the first time someone opens their mouth, we should be looking at what is the context of the lifestyle that they are living and how they're meeting us and what is their thought process. So from me, I start talking right away and looking for, can they actually do what I am going to ask them to do? And what are the blocks? And usually those blocks are going to be something stress related and something related to the way they think about things. It's all the old stories, James. We know this, right? It's like we write these stories in our early development, child development, adolescent development, young adulthood development. We have things happen to us, and then we decide right there how we're going to approach this. I call this misguided unconscious decisions, by the way. Mud. We get stuck in the mud. They're misguided, by the way, because we don't have the wisdom, we don't have the tool, we don't have the know-how when we're young, when we're adolescents, when we're young adults, to manage the stress that comes to us. So these misguided unconscious decisions, the way we're thinking about the world, can keep us from making the changes we want to make. It's all in our identity. So I would say, here's something I'll throw out at you. We think it's habits and behaviors. We think it's motivation and willpower. It's how we tend to think about it. It's really identity and beliefs. That is what habits and behaviors flow out of.
One of the things, as you're saying that, is resonating for me is that I am now face to face with an adolescent daughter, and I hear things coming out of her mouth, and I'm like, did I do that? Am I showcasing that through my living?
Yeah.
And that's become a source of purpose for me, because I'm realized, like, I don't want to like curtail her potential because I just am not I'm not participating in my full potential. And that's become a source of new purpose for me that wasn't the case until I had it fed back very intimately to me.
I love that example, because here's what we tend to think, right? You see your daughter probably going through struggles. She's having trials, she's having difficulty. She's in that place where she's really worried about acceptance and belonging as adolescents. Of course, as children, it's safety and security. But what happens is we tend to think, as physicians, we tend to think in capital T trauma. If someone has like a capital T trauma, then we think it's affecting their nervous system. Then we think it's inhibiting their resilience. But it doesn't have to be a trauma. It can be a struggle. Very simpler from my life. I was left once at a ballpark, baseball park. My parents had 4 kids. They were running all over the place. And I was left for several hours at a ballpark as it started to become dark when I was about 6 or 7. Now, you and I both know what happened, right? My mom got home and said, "Did you get Jade?" And my dad was like, "No, I thought you were getting him." And, logically, they raced back to get me. But that event had a profound impact on my safety and security in the world and my ability to trust, because I made certain decisions about that. And that was a very simple event. So, of course, as a parent, we can't do everything right. We're going to make mistakes, but we do need to look at our patients and the beliefs that they have formulated based on the things that have happened to them and the way that follows them around. And I do think purpose is the antidote, because with purpose, we can go back to all these things, these trials, these tribulations, these struggles that we had when we were young, and make meaning out of them. We humans are meaning-making machines. That's one of our great powers, right? We can turn difficult things into something that matters, that makes sense and can make a difference. And that's really what purpose is. I've had this type of life. What do I do with this pain? Can I turn it into a path to purpose? What do I do with this suffering? Can I turn it as a source of meaning? What do I do with this hurt? Can I make it a way to help? And when our patients start looking at their health care from that perspective, it gives broad meaning to everything they're doing, from the supplements we ask them to take, to the diets we tend to change them to the exercise protocols and everything else. Otherwise, if we're not looking at that stuff, there's major blocks to those changes that we as clinicians are not aware of, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Well, look, I want to share my appreciation for you coming back and continuing to go to this well, because I feel like, you know, if you watch the rest of the conference, you just get into the very minute details of genetics and toxins and, you know, all the pathways and so forth. But I know, and you communicate so well that without this, what else is there? Like, you have to get people from 0 to 1. You have to get from participation. When I'm speaking to practitioners, they're wondering, well, why is the patient dropping off after the first appointment? They know exactly what I gave them, the perfect plan. It doesn't mean anything unless they're activated. And so I appreciate you coming back to the well. We're going to have some of the best bits from Jade's talk. Check it out.
Appreciate you, James.
So, building an identity around purpose. This is a 3-step process that I'm going to teach. And hopefully it's simple enough that you can do this with your patients starting Monday. The first step is rewrite and integrate the story. We must uncover, examine, and integrate these hidden seed stories. Written exposure therapy is the tool that we can use to do this. How many of you have heard of written exposure therapy or used it? Anyone? This tool is a tool we can use. We can use it to go through the feel, deal, and heal process for individuals to start unlocking their purpose. Now, the other part of this is that then once we unlock and start to rewrite these old stories, untether ourselves from the chains, we need to teach the nervous system to feel differently. Remember, we are in stuck emotions, stuck in afraid, anger, frustration, resistance, insecurity, anxiety, depression, being stuck in afraid. We need to get ourselves stuck in something else. Gratitude, joy, fulfillment, right? So we have to learn the new feeling. We have to teach the nervous system the new feeling. This is where feeling-based meditation comes in. We'll get into that. And then, most importantly, the law of attraction, right? Think your way there. Well, it works in reverse, and in reverse, it's much more powerful based on the research that I see, and that is act as if. Be it until you see it. Not fake it until you make it, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. Be it till you see it. It's a critical difference. So let's get into the first part of this. So this study looks at talk therapy around PTSD, and the gold standard is cognitive processing therapy for post-traumatic stress. Now, why am I picking PTSD? Because we all know how difficult this is. So if we have a tool that works for that, we can have a tool for our everyday patients who are dealing with the everyday struggles of life, don't we? So, written exposure therapy compared to this cognitive processing therapy. I'm going to teach you this, but I just want to show you a few things. Cognitive processing therapy is 12 sessions. Written exposure therapy is 5. Cognitive processing therapy, 90 minutes typically. Written exposure therapy, 40. I'm going to teach you even shorter than 40. There's no homework in written exposure therapy, although you'll give it as homework, right? You'll actually do it as a homework assignment for your patients. And there's a 6% dropout rate versus a 40% dropout rate. By the way, why would you think the dropout rate is so high for cognitive processing therapy? It's so high because here's the interesting thing about our unconscious mind. It does not speak in logic and linearity and language, does it? It speaks in metaphor, it speaks in symbol, it speaks in feeling. So if you start talking to someone about their traumas and go, hey, what was the A, B, C, X, Y, Z, 1, 2, 3 of your trauma? Instead of being like, what did it feel like? You can actually make that worse, can't you? And especially if you do it too fast, is what the research shows. So written exposure therapy will take them through this feel, deal, and heal phase. So here's how you do it. You tell your client, your patient, that you want them to write what happened, and you want them to focus on the feeling, not the narrative. Not the logic, but the feeling. So it's not like, okay, I woke up at 7, I got in my car, I drove down the street, I made a right turn, and then all of a sudden I got hit by a car. It's more like I got hit by a car and I had this overwhelming fear flood me, and I felt it in my chest and in my throat. And whenever I think about it, it's still in my chest and in my throat. And it feels like this hot, viscous tar that gets spikes on it. And it's angry, and it causes this burning sensation. It gives me a heartburn type feeling. You see the difference? And so they write about the feeling. They go back into the feeling. Now, can this be distressful for some people? Certainly it can. It's kind of like looking at the wound again. Remember, a wound you pick at, a scab that you pick at won't heal, right? Most people, that's what they're doing. They're picking at their mental, emotional scabs. What we're doing is we're saying, you know what, stop picking at it. Let's look at it. Let's clean it. Let's do all the things to it. Yes, it's going to be a little bit worse maybe going to trigger some emotions, but let's clean it all up. Let's take a deep look at what we need to do to get this healed. And so they focus on the feeling, and they write about this in a journal with pen and paper. And yes, it works with typing on a computer, but something about research shows actually putting pen to paper. How many of you have seen this research? It's really cool, right? Something about actually taking a pen and pencil does something different, creates distance from us, for us. So what's the deal phase like? Well, now that you felt what happened, then you go, what story did I write? What misguided, unconscious decision did I tell myself about the world? Write it down. How am I stuck in the mud as a result of this? So you write that down. What did I tell myself about safety and security and acceptance and belonging and freedom and autonomy? What did I make this mean about myself? What did I make it mean about the world? The world's unsafe. I'm unworthy. This kind of stuff. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, now we write into the future as if we are a producer and a director of a great epic film, right? And we write into the future, writing in present tense, but projecting out into the future. As a result of this pain, this hurt, this struggle, I taught this, I created this, I made a difference in this way, I became this, I grew this way. And this begins to complete the feel, deal, heal process. This untethers people from their old stories. We can't give them purpose until they're untethered from their old purposeless stories. And you do this over and over again, and in the research it's recommended 5 times. And here's how I suggest you do it. The first time you give this as a homework assignment, you tell them to set their mobile device to 10 minutes, and they write the first part, the feeling part, for 10 minutes. Then 5 minutes on the deal phase. Their alarm goes off again, they set 5 minutes again, and they write about the heal phase. Next day or next week, look what happens. Now it's 9 minutes, 4 minutes, 7 minutes. Now it's 8, 3, 9, 7, 2, 11. You see what we're doing? We're slowly rewriting the narrative, focusing on the new story, not the old story. Has this been shown to be effective in research? It absolutely has. Do we have enough of this research? Absolutely not. But we know that this works. We know that this gives people back their purpose and gives them a sense of meaning and passion all at the same time.
All right, I'm here with Dr. Christy Robbins. Doc, I want to thank you for revitalizing my mind on the topic of GLP-1s. I was definitely against it this time last year, and we did that podcast, and it started me thinking, okay, is this a tool that could be used? You're here now at a conference where a lot of doctors are talking about innovation. What have you learned, or is there something you'd like to contribute to this conversation from your clinical experience doing this for years?
Yes, thank you. I enjoyed the conference a lot so far. I feel like you're right. I feel like these medications, GLP-1, GIPs, are here to stay. And so I think for me, being able to use them more effectively with our patients is key. This has helped a lot with trying to figure out, okay, these are tools we can all use. How do we support them? How do we control, some of those side effects? How do we make those patients be more successful with what they're doing? And so far, it's been a great conference and learning really how to support those as we go along. And some of the hormonal stuff, Dr. Jones yesterday was great with her perimenopause, menopause talk, because we do a lot with that too.
What are the most critical things that you think you have to do to support GLP-1s?
Gut health is maintenance is primary because you're really working on receptors there, and then also detoxification, and then really also the muscle mass formation and support. Or if you're losing muscle, how do we rebuild that at the end?
Yeah.
So
Some people are doing it wrong. It sounds like the position that you've taken in the community is to accept the people who've been doing it wrong and teach them how to do it right. Is that about right?
yes, I mean we've been using these. I've been using these medicines on label, off label since they came out in 2010, I guess. Well, Victoza was 2010. So really, I just think knowing how they work and understanding and kind of being able to see, how they work in people and what side effects they would have, or just how to make them more successful.
Yep.
And then also how to maintain it. That's really hard. Sometimes how do we use the medication for maintenance in sporadic ways or different ways? Just kind of each person's very different, so you have to adjust it for them. So
All right. Well, if you didn't check out the podcast I did with Dr. Christy Robbins, we'll put links in the show notes. Thanks so much for being here.
thank you.
All right. I'm here with Tina Musselman, OG, Functional Forum, Practice Accelerator legend. How's it going?
You're so funny. Good. Thank you for that kind introduction.
How are you enjoying the conference?
The conference has been great. Really great reminders.
Yeah.
Some old stuff and some new stuff. And then, of course, exploring weight loss medications. And I mean, they're wild. I've spent 20 years in bariatrics and weight loss, and these medications, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. So it's nice to have an overview.
So in your world of people who have been in the weight loss industry, how would you describe what's going on and what functional medicine can add to the conversation?
Yeah. So like I said, I've been in weight loss for 20 years. I've seen things come and go and ebb and flow, but I've had people flat out tell me, I don't want to learn any of this because I just don't want to eat. And just really laying that foundation of the importance of, no, we really have to get diet. We really have to get your protein. We really have to get your strength training going for people to get long-term outcomes. So it's not unlike what we've seen before with phentermine and other medications and even weight loss surgery people regain. So it's been good.
And with the right surround, this can be healthy and sustainable. Combination of medication and what we've learned at functional medicine.
I think time will tell whether or not you agree or not. It's here.
Yeah.
Patients are getting it. It's being doled out like water. So we either have to figure out how to roll with the punches to help the people who are on it, or we close and turn a blind eye and we don't help those people. So, I'm not a prescriber, but I'm a helper. So whatever I have to do to support people, how they come to me is how I practice.
All right. Well, wise words. Thanks so much for being part of it.
Yeah, thank you.
So a new speaker on the scene at this conference, Dr. Peter Kozlowski, very experienced physician, talking about all things detoxification. We caught up with him for a quick chat. Enjoy. All right, we're here with Dr. Peter Kozlowski. Just came off stage. Doc, I want to say congrats on a great talk. It's refreshing to have a doctor on stage who is doing it day in, day out and coming straight from the clinic. It was really cool.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, today you mentioned the five drivers of detoxification. Do you want to just give us for people who aren't here, just give us a quick overview of what you see from the biggest possible picture?
So I would say number one is definitely cortisol as being, so I kind of focused on 5 applicable areas that we could work on with our patients Monday morning, right? Like, what am I seeing as barriers to detox? Because in itself, it should be easy, right? If they have heavy metals, I use chelation and that should work, right? If they have mycotoxins, you get out of the moldy building and you go on a few nutraceuticals and it goes away. So why do some people have a barrier to detox or their gut health? And to me, it's cortisol and it's stress, right? And people don't look at cortisol as a toxin because it's a hormone. So today, we were talking about obesity and barriers to weight loss, barriers to detox. And so to me, that's the biggest one, right? Is people just need to get out of their own way. We live in this super information world. People are so stressed out. They have so much going on. And I think they're blocking themselves from being able to detox, from letting nutraceuticals work, from letting lifestyle interventions work is cortisol. Sugar was the kind of a second one that's not really a toxin, that I argue is a toxin because we eat it in excess. Like I presented the statistic that the average American's eating over 270,000 calories in sugar a year. Sugar basically, sugar equals fat, to put it simply, right? And sugar inhibits your mitochondrial function. And so kind of the third thing that I focused on is what is the connection between toxins and weight loss, right? And for me, I talk a lot about the mitochondria, the toxins. There's lots and lots of studies that show that brown fat has lots of mitochondria. It's healthy. That's our metabolically active fat. There's white fat that is very low in mitochondria. With mitochondrial damage, brown fat can turn white, which is kind of what makes you gain weight, right? And beta oxidation of fatty acids happens in the mitochondria. So if your mitochondria are trashed, right, how are you going to be able to lose weight? How are you going to metabolize fat? And the number one way our mitochondria are getting trashed is our toxic environment, right? And so that's what all the presenters are talking about this weekend is all the different toxins we're exposed to. Like for me, I talk about heavy metals and mold and glyphosate and the endotoxins from SIBO or dysbiosis. That's all creating this mitochondrial damage that if we don't address those things through our more traditional functional medicine testing, our mitochondria don't have a chance, right? And then we don't have a chance of losing weight or detoxing. And that was another point we brought up is so many detox protocols focus on supporting phase 1, phase 2. We don't talk about that your mitochondria, that your liver is full of mitochondria, right? And you need healthy mitochondria for phase 1 and phase 2 to even work, right? So for me, I sound like kind of like just a broken record with the mitochondria, but I really believe that it's our toxic environment that's creating that damage that's then affecting our detox, our weight loss, our hormones, and everything else.
Well, Doc, it was a great talk, and I'm glad to be able to share some of the best bits with our audience. Check it out.
To me, I think we can so quickly jump into detox plans, protocols, but a lot of times we forget about the first step, which is just our main 3 detox organs, because everybody goes straight to the liver, right? At least our patients do, they go straight to the liver. For me, our main detox organs are really our skin, our lungs, and our gut. And those are what are under the constant attack. And our liver, to me, is just kind of like backup, right? And so really our barriers should be doing the job. Our skin is a barrier, right? And our skin is under this onslaught. Dr. Bland was talking about SARS-2 and COVID and how in America we were just doing worse with it and about our innate immune response. Well, they found a study out of Australia and New Zealand that they're finding we're absorbing a credit card's worth of plastic into our sinuses and respiratory system. So to me, that doesn't really sound like the best environment to block or protect us from COVID, right? I don't know if there's studies on that plastic in our sinuses is good for that, but I don't think it is. There's so much now, athletic clothing is full of plastic, right? And that's a problem. The first time I heard about organic clothing, I kind of thought it was a scam just to make more money, and then you really look at the amount of glyphosate that's sprayed onto cotton, all the chemicals in this athletic clothing that's skin tight. So talking with patients about just little things like this to just try to lower our exposure wherever we can. Your lungs are a barrier. Mercury from coal burning plants, our shower water, the more we heat it up. So I'm actually also from Chicago. I was born at the old Cook County Hospital. I spent most of my adult life living just a few blocks from here. And 2020 is when my wife and I packed up and we moved out to Montana, and we spent a few years in Montana hiding out. And we just came back last year. So I worked out at a gym here, East Bank Club on the river, and my favorite thing to do was go in the steam room after working out. And then one day I was sitting, and it might have been after one of these conferences, and I was sitting in the steam room, and I realized the water in the steam room is being produced from the Chicago city water. And it was like the worst revelation for me, because that was my favorite thing to do. And I haven't gone back to the steam room since, which sucks. But so there's water. Lead in airplane exhaust. So one of my favorite things to test my patients for is heavy metals, and we'll look at that later. I've found thousands of people with elevated levels of lead and mercury. Those are the two that I find the most common. But the one that sticks out to me the most is I had a mechanic at O'Hare who was developing autoimmune disease and eczema. And on the lead test that I use, a level of 10 is in the red or off the chart. This guy had a level of 140. So, and they say they're trying to work on that. I mean, I don't know. I test people every day that live around O'Hare, and that's not the only source, but I don't really believe that they're working on it. And then your gut is a barrier, right? And this is my favorite thing to teach people about the gut, is that the inside of your gut is actually outside of your body. The gut is a tube that starts with the mouth, ends with the anus. There's openings on both ends, right? And so something that gets into your gut does not necessarily get into your body. And you know, most of our patients come in having heard of leaky gut and they don't really understand it. It's a pretty simple way to talk about it. It's like the same as if your skin had a bunch of holes in it, right? And that's what our guts look like. But the difference is people wash their hands 20 times a day, right? But then they'll go throw anything in their gut tube because they don't get it. They don't understand it. And so I think that concept, explaining that to people kind of brings it to life and makes them kind of more aware, like, hey, what I'm putting in my gut, I wouldn't be doing this to my skin. Why am I doing it to my gut? So our barriers are overwhelmed, right? And you guys already heard about it, and we're going to hear more about it the rest of the weekend, but our barriers are under a pretty big onslaught. So what happens to toxins to get through those barriers, right? And Dr. Bland said it, they go to our liver, right? And so we're very blessed with that our liver there is backup to break these toxins down. So our liver goes through this two-step process called detox that makes them water soluble. And once they're water soluble, we can then get rid of them. We sweat them out, we poop them out, and we pee them out. That's what detox is, right? And again, going back to the basics with our patients, you know, again, you come out of this conference and you're so excited about all these tests and all the different things you can do for them. But if you skip over, and Deanna said you should have sleep on here as well too, because it's really, you know, if we get our patients sleeping, we get them pooping, peeing, sweating, that goes a long way. I mean, we work with patients that, at least I do, from different incomes where, you know, they can't go and buy every nutraceutical, they can't go and buy every test, but they want to do something. This is free, right, for the most part, or it's just part of life. So if you get someone in that you're worried about detox, but they're not moving their bowels every day, that's a great place to start. Unfunk their gut, right, as I would say. Drinking enough water, exercising, sweating. But again, our livers are overwhelmed, so what happens to the toxins that aren't broken down by the liver? They are fat soluble, and they look for fatty places to get stored. And every cell in your body is surrounded by a membrane which has fat, except for red blood cells. This study said the average male has about 36 trillion cells, the average female about 28 trillion, and the average child about 17 trillion. So there are a trillion of places for these toxins to get stored. So I just did a talk last weekend on dementia prevention. I talk about toxins. We talk about weight loss, I talk about toxins. My book is about hormones. I talk about toxins. Because they go everywhere and they can affect anything, and as the more you work with your patients, you'll see, I mean, again, you can take 100 of your patients who have a mold toxicity, and every one of them presents differently. And this is why. So toxins, they damage DNA, they modify gene expression, they poison enzymes, they break cell membranes, but what's the worst thing that they do? They cause mitochondrial dysfunction. And like I said, this is becoming more and more my passion is your mitochondria. And there's all types of different ways. And mitochondria have so many different functions. I think one of like the trendiest terms that's out there is like the powerhouse of your cells, right? Most of your patients have heard that. The mitochondria are the powerhouse of our cells, but they have lots of different roles. Specifically today towards detox and weight loss, what's the connection? So you need healthy mitochondria for healthy fat metabolisms. Fatty acids enter the mitochondria for beta oxidation, which makes acetyl-CoA, which enters the Krebs cycle to make ATP. If fats don't get oxidized, they will get stored. There are lots of studies out there that basically show changes in mitochondrial function and mitochondrial dysfunction being associated with insulin resistance and obesity. So mitochondrial dysfunction in mature adipocytes has been linked to defects in fatty acid oxidation, secretion of adipokines, lipid accumulation, insulin resistance. Reduction in oxidative capacity of brown adipocytes results in impaired thermogenesis, linked to diet-induced obesity. Reduced ATP found in bodies and brains in obesity, right? So mitochondria dysfunction connected to obesity. Mitochondria go through two processes. One's called fission, one's called fusion. Fission is when they divide into two or smaller mitochondria. Fusion is when they bind into one larger mitochondria. There are studies that show abnormalities in fission and fusion lead to obesity. And so this SHBC893 corrects diet-induced obesity. A lot of these like biochemistry terms I've left to Deanna and Jeff. I'm trying to take it easier on you guys. Keep it a little lighter. Lunch is coming. I know it gets tiring. And then this MFN2, a mitochondrial protein which participates in fusion. Ablation of it resulted in the loss of mitochondria and ER contact, causing leptin resistance, reduced energy expenditure, and obesity.
All right, I'm here with Dr. Medea Saeed, also known as the Holistic Mom ND online. Brought an unbelievable spread of food yesterday. Dr. Bland, Dr. Minich, all of us were having a special lunchtime feast. Here, the second day, what have we got here?
Cassava flour blueberry pancakes with the rainbow fruit around it, packed with protein and all those prebiotics that come from the cassava flour, good healthy fats from the avocado oil. So like literally a complete meal right here too.
Is it true that you cook for 9 kids every day?
Not 9 kids, 5 kids, but 9 of us all together because my in-laws live with me.
Okay, great. So what are some tips for practitioners who are dealing with families that are cooking at that sort of scale?
Taking care of yourself.
Okay.
Focus on gratitude, positivity, making sure you incorporate some sort of meditation, mindfulness, nature, taking a walk, intermittent fasting, focusing on real food, lots of vegetables, clean protein, healthy fats. In my family, we teach the kids and everybody else, whenever you're hungry, go down the list. Focus on the foods that are gonna heal your body, lower that insulin resistance, optimize the gut microbiome, and are the most nutrient-dense foods for you. That's vegetables, clean protein, healthy fats. And go down that list. It makes it sort of simple. Instead of focusing on the foods you can't have, focusing on the foods you can have. And then stocking up your pantry and your fridge for success. Because there's nothing in my house the kids can't eat. Okay. So there's no whatever they crave, they crave pancakes. Yeah. I found a really healthier alternative. We did chocolate chip cookies, you just taste it.
Yeah, delicious.
So the chocolate chip cookies are Himalayan tartary buckwheat with nut butter and avocado oil and almond flour, date chocolate chips. So just find those replacements for those junk food cravings, and so that you have that, and therefore there's a positive conversation around food.
Great. I heard you got something fun coming up at IFM.
Yes!
You do it.
Me and the kids are speaking about practical tips for feeding children.
All right. Well,
the kids have a podcast called the Holistic Kid Show podcast. They've interviewed over 140 guests. They're writing a book called The Teen Health Revolution. So we are so incredibly honored that IFM invited us to speak this year.
This is what it looks like. The revolution is here. Well
done. We're doing it.
All right, check out the next segment. All right, we're here with Dr. Thomas. So always learning. And
always learning.
Conference. So, Doc, what did you learn this weekend? Anything you want to share?
Yeah, so holism. So as every presenter today didn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. They said, obviously the foundation is diet and lifestyle, but there are those times when medications and even surgery are really important. So functional medicine isn't about discounting one idea and replacing it with another. It's about trying to get to the underlying cause, while at the same time, sometimes we have to hold our patients together with bubblegum and baling wire, using medications and whatever is necessary until the underlying issues are corrected through diet and lifestyle.
All right, you heard it here. Doc, thanks so much. Great to see you again.
Yep, my pleasure.
Keep it going.
Yep.
So one of my favorite speakers is Dr. Carrie Jones. She gave a great talk. Let's catch up with her to talk all things perimenopause, menopause, and how this relates to metabolic health. All right, we are here with Dr. Carrie Jones, and we've done a number of interviews over the years together, but unsolicited, on the way up to this venue, a doctor from the event stopped you and said, that was the greatest talk that I've ever seen. So how do you feel about that in the moment?
In the moment, are you kidding? It was, I love it. It made me feel so happy and heartwarmed, and I got the message across because the whole talk was on menopause and cardiometabolic syndrome, and that's so important.
Well, I'm 43, and I wanted to ask you, is there an explosion in conversations about menopause, or am I only now seeing it because that's what's coming into my social media?
Because of your age. Yeah. It is an explosion, and I'm here for it. I'm glad we have so much education on the transition women make through perimenopause into menopause, because we aren't taught about this. I mean, you're not taught about it. I'm not taught about it. And suddenly us women are there thinking, what just happened? What's going on with me? So the fact that you are seeing it everywhere, we need this education out there.
Great. So this conference is really to do with, I would say, sort of the cross-section of things that we've spoken about before: hormones, cardiometabolic health, toxicity. When you, in this amazing talk that you just gave, and we'll have some of the best moments coming up, can you give us, the viewers, a flavor of like what the talk was about and why you think this topic is mission critical to this sort of range of topics?
The conference is with the cardiometabolic part. That's where I focused, because as we know, cardiovascular disease, #1 killer of humans. But what we don't talk about very often is that as women transition into menopause and the decline in their estradiol, everything flips on the head for them. They become more insulin resistant. Their cholesterol goes up, including their particles, their apolipoprotein B, their insulin goes up. They become more leptin resistant. Their visceral fat goes up. Their inflammatory cytokines go up. And they will say to you, I didn't change anything, and yet everything changed. Why did everything change? And if we don't address it right then and there, if we don't talk to them about it in the perimenopausal transition, so as they're in their 40s and going through this, they're at risk for the cardiometabolic outcomes that we don't want. Because we're trying to avoid what we kind of refer to as the 4 horsemen, or the 4 horsewomen. We don't want cardiovascular disease, right? We don't want neurodegenerative disease, cancer, and then of course, frailty, conditions of frailty. And all of those exponentially increase risk as women go through the menopausal transition.
Has it been a taboo topic?
It's been a very taboo topic. I think nobody wants to talk about it. Grandmas didn't talk about it. Moms didn't talk about it, not often, and women got shut down. Oh, that's expected. That's what happens at that age. There's nothing I have for you. Or here's the birth control pill. That's all we have. And so if you've been shut down and your family doesn't talk about it because nobody talked to them about it, then it becomes taboo because everyone's like, well, I guess we can't talk about it. And now I'm pretty thrilled that everyone's talking about it, and everybody wants to talk about it. The amount of practitioners, the amount of just people who come up to me and are like, thank you for saying that. Thank you for making me not feel crazy and helping me understand what's happening. And now I can be proactive about it is just, I can't even count the numbers. It's great.
Wonderful. Well, look, I'm glad that we were able to be here. I'm glad we were able to capture it. And we're going to show you some of the best bits from Dr. Jones's talk. Enjoy.
So what happens is her estradiol starts to decline. Well, first it's chaotic. And then it starts to decline. And when it declines, her estradiol to testosterone ratio shifts even more. Women have a lot more testosterone in their system than they have estradiol, but estradiol gets all the love. But we still have a lot of testosterone in our system. And it's a nice little ratio between testosterone and estradiol. But as estradiol drops, we become relatively testosterone dominant to our fat cells, to our androgen receptors. And we have a lot more androgen receptors often in the midsection. than we do in our thighs, hips, and booty. So we consider like the estrogenic look is more curvy, and we consider the androgenic look more apple-shaped because we have a lot of androgen receptors there. So when we have this relative change, women do start to notice like, I never used to have a belly and now I have a belly. Now my pants are tight. What's this roll? Because it's moving up because that's what's getting stimulated. So now we have all this visceral fat, which of course is inflammatory, right? It's its own organ that is a problem. On top of that, when we break down fatty acids out of our fat cells, it's supposed to go through beta oxidation so that we can then continue to use it to make things like ATP. Except because we don't have the stimulation of estradiol like we used to, our beta oxidation cycles don't work as well as they used to. So now we have these free fatty acids floating around, and they can't get broken down, where do free fatty acids get stored? Back in the fat cell, right? Back in the fat cell. And because we have this like in between of free fatty acids, we have this rise in triglycerides. Not only do we have the rise in LDL-C, but we have this rise in triglycerides because the fat cell being broken down inappropriately is releasing all these free fatty acids that can't get through beta oxidation, and we have a problem. So we get this total imbalance all because of the decline in estradiol. The decline in estradiol also makes us more insulin resistant. So now our blood sugar is going up, our insulin is going up, we can't get through beta oxidation, we're temporarily more androgenic, so those receptors are being stimulated more than they were, and she's not happy. She's coming to you, and she may have all sorts of other risks that you find wildly more important, but she's coming to you going, no, my pants don't fit. What do I do? So now that you can kind of understand this, we have to work this up because we know because visceral adiposity is inflammatory, and we know the decline in estradiol is inflammatory, and we know the decline in estradiol, especially in the GI tract, causes more inflammation. Do you know that estradiol is a big trigger for your tight junctions to do their thing? So when her estradiol declines, she's at a higher risk for leaky gut, even if she never had leaky gut in the past. Or maybe she had it, and you being the phenomenal practitioner helped her through it, and now she's like, I don't know, I'm 45, I'm 52, and it came back, I have leaky gut again, I'm on your protocol. She's got a problem in her tight junctions, and so now everything's slipping through, getting the other side, the immune system's pissed, and now we have more inflammation. I don't know who designed this. I would like a word. I have some thoughts. And I listened, Dr. Blaine and I, a group of us were at dinner last night, and then listening to Dr. Blaine today, where he was talking about genetics and like the Amazonian women, and they could fight infections, but their fecundity was higher. And it's kind of like there's a silver lining. Like the reason these things happen are for good things. And I'm like, name a good thing. Like name a reason, like visceral fat going up. Dr. Blaine, what is the silver lining that we become wildly more inflammatory during this transition? Now, is there a lot we can do? There's a ton we can do. There's a ton we can do, which is the good thing, and that's what we need to focus on. But I do need you to understand the physiology of what's happening, so you as practitioners aren't like, I don't know, you tried everything. This is what's happening. So as a little recap, we've declined in estradiol, and as we know, when the estradiol goes down, SHBG can go down as well. So now we have more free testosterone. There's other reasons for more free testosterone. The outer layer of the follicle in the ovary is called a theca cell. And when they're getting yelled at, they can get thicker, hyperthecosis, and they can produce a lot more testosterone as well. But anyway, higher visceral adiposity. Now we have an android fat distribution, decrease in lean muscle mass. Remember, estradiol in women is a big trigger. I mean, along with testosterone, but estradiol is also important for muscle building, lean muscle mass. Increase in insulin resistance, increase in leptin, which is one of our signals from the fat cells to the brain to say, we're good, we're full, burn that extra energy, stop eating. But when it goes up, we become leptin resistant. And then one of the complaints of women is, I'm hungry all the time. I don't feel satiated. And as a result, I'm also gaining weight. Increase in inflammatory cytokines like IL-6 and increase in LDL-C. Remember, LDL-C droplets are the precursor, that's the backbone to hormones. LDL-C droplet becomes pregnenolone, which then goes on to make a bunch of other hormones. So, and we need estradiol to help with cholesterol. So the most common metabolic disorders in menopause include dyslipidemia, impaired glucose intolerance, insulin resistance, hyperinsulinemia, and type 2 diabetes. And of course, all of these can contribute to and worsen the four horsewomen. Four horsewomen is kind of a mouthful, but you know what I mean. So we're cancer, cardiovascular disease, neurodegenerative, and frailty. Like, we're trying to avoid those, and this is what women are up against. So when we start testing, I am curious, and by a show of hands, when was the last time you had any cardiometabolic markers tested, basic, advanced, or both? So raise your hand if you're A, never, or it has been a long time. Don't be embarrassed, don't be shy. I saw some of you like, I'm a bad doctor. All right, how about B, in the last 5 years, you've had some blood work done, some advanced stuff done. How about in the last 2 to 3 years? How about in the last year? Amazing. One of the common things I hear all the time, and you probably do as well, is that you have a woman who's going through the menopausal transition, and last year her labs were perfect, and this year you're pretty sure the lab made a mistake because they're so bad. You're like, how did your triglycerides go from 65 to 124? How did your insulin go from 2 to 12? Like, how did this happen? And if we don't stay on top of the women going through this transition, and it can be a pain, they're like, do I have to get it every year? Like, are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure, because I'm trying to reduce your cardiometabolic risk. So where do you start? Obviously, you do not have to test sex hormones to diagnose or tell somebody, hey, you are in perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, and you don't need to test to put somebody on hormones according to the guidelines. Testing, though, is really helpful just to see where you're at, maybe where you're going, or maybe how it's broken down. But I do need to say the guidelines say you're not required to test. But you do know that you can get an idea over time of like, what's their estrogen doing? So however you look at their estrogen, consider looking at estrogen, because estrogen improves insulin sensitivity, suppresses gluconeogenesis, which can cause the increase in cortisol. Which leads me to cortisol, which Dr. Koz talked about. Cortisol and glucose. Cortisol increases gluconeogenesis and glycogenolysis. Now you have more glucose in the blood, which makes sense. If you have a tiger that you need to run from and think through, then the body's like, absolutely, let's increase this to increase the glucose that's available to the brain and some of the skeletal muscle. Cortisol also decreases insulin sensitivity in the peripheral tissue because it wants to give you more glucose, especially for your brain. A couple of years ago, this is before COVID, so I guess 2019, I was in Mexico and I was lecturing, and one of the functional medicine doctors there brought me a test and said, do you mind going through the test results with me, this woman? And I said, look at the hormones, how's her stress? I mean, the cortisol was just through the roof. And she goes, doctor, in this amazingly sexy accent, Dr. Jones, everybody is stressed. Everybody. Just tell me what to do about her hormones. And I was like, no. No, you have to take it seriously. Yes, everybody is stressed. Yes, like the world we're in is kind of a mess, but we have to deal with it. We have to talk with our patients about it. I can lecture. I have a continuous glucose monitor in right now, and I wear them periodically just as a check-in because I'm in my 40s, and it's a good thing. But I literally on Tuesday of this week, I lectured 3 different times for an hour. My cortisol, or my continuous glucose monitor was like, it's like, we know that you're lecturing, it's totally cool, not a lion. Then I got an angry text message, and I angry text messaged back, and my glucose was like, boop. Like, that's clearly a lion, she's mad, we need to fight. So it's neat and looking in the mirror to see what your glucose does because of cortisol. I mean, cortisol's whole job is to give you glucose. I mean, okay, not its whole job, but like a big portion of its job. It's a glucocorticosteroid. Give you glucose, that's what it does. If it was applying for a job, that's the first bullet point is I give you glucose. So do be aware, like we need cortisol to do it. We need the circadian rhythm. We need it in its right pattern. We need it for inflammation, but it's also gonna give you glucose. And in the right amounts, totally cool, it's healthy, it's physiologic. Once we get too high, not physiologic. Dr. Koz totally talked about it. So this is why we have to look at like cortisol, glucose, insulin, the interaction of insulin and pituitary hormones. So let's particularly look at cortisol. Basically, in tiny print, but at the bottom it says, thus, it is not surprising that cortisol excess is associated with disturbed glucose homeostasis. Why is this not talked about in mainstream medicine? Why are we not saying this? Why are we jumping? And I'm not against, if you have diabetes, like we need to get that figured out. GLP-1s, go for it. But like, why aren't we addressing this stuff too? Why aren't we pointing to people and go, you kind of like seem like a stressed out chihuahua. We should probably work on that. That's contributing to your glucose issues. All right, lipid markers. A lot of this is going to be basic. I just have to say, remind everybody, of course, can't just jump to, all the advanced stuff. So we have our basic lipid panel, and that's all they can do, or that's all they can afford. Like, it's absolutely a start, and I'm okay with that. There's a lot of debate out there. Like, you should just do an apolipoprotein B, and I agree. Not all insurances, they will cover a lipid panel often, yearly, if that's the route you go, insurance-based. And it's cheap, so patients love that, and we're starting with the basics. So the problem, though, is that 50% of MIs, they have a normal cholesterol, right? And we see this all the time. It makes the news. It makes the front of magazines like Time. Like, oopsies, maybe that lipid panel, we got to dig deeper. Because the problem when we're looking at the cardiovascular part of the four horsemen, atherosclerosis, but it's inflammation. These little tiny LDL particles are getting beyond the wall. Well, how are they getting beyond the wall? Like, who's escorting them? What happened? Did it tear? Is it inflammation? Is it a breakdown? What's up with the glycocalyx? Like, I have so many questions, but none of that's getting evaluated in your basic lipid panel. So we have major inflammation because at the arterial wall, then the LDL gets behind it. Now the immune system gets involved. That's more inflammation. So we have to really evaluate this. We know, of course, high blood pressure, insulin resistance, diabetes, high cholesterol, obesity, dyslipidemia, high level of CRP, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, risk factors for atherosclerotic development. But here's the kicker of today. We have to add menopause. And I hate to do it because menopause is not a disease. It's a natural progression of us through life. But we have to be aware. We cannot look at somebody who's in their 40s or 50s who are going through this transition and not take this seriously, not take this into account. We have to keep track of them, and we have to be very proactive with them.
Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you really enjoyed today and hope you learned something that you can apply into your practice. Next month, we will be at the Institute for Functional Medicine's annual international conference in Las Vegas, Nevada, including the launch of Vegas Fest, our new participatory learning event built around the vagus nerve. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.